Hello and welcome everyone. This video is about John Alexander Dickman, convicted and hanged for the murder of John Innes Nisbet in 1910, and for the purpose of this video I will call him Mr. Dickman. A sad and tragic story, and one which I have been trying to work out for some time. Was John actually guilty of the crime he was convicted and hanged for, or was he not? I will let you decide. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Mr. Dickman was born in about 1864 to parents Joseph and Zelina. He was baptised in June 1864 in Newcastle upon Tyne. There are very few details of his earlier life, but he married a lady called Annie in 1892 in Newcastle, and they went on to have two children, a boy and a girl. And by 1901 they were living in the Heaton area. By around 1910, Mr. Dickman was working as a secretary to a colliery company, but some reports also suggest that he had been making a living as a betting man and a commission agent. John Innes Nisbet, aged 44, the victim, was a pay clerk employed in Newcastle for colliery owners Rain and Burn, and on alternative Fridays he would cash a large cheque at Newcastle and take the money, wages for the miners, to the Stobswood Colliery near Widrington in Northumberland. For the rest of the video I will refer to him as Mr. Nisbet. On the morning of the 18th of March 1910, Mr. Nisbet cashed a cheque for £370, 9 shillings and 6pence. This would be around £40,000 in today's money. This money was in the form of coins. He placed the money into a black bag which he then locked. There is no indication of how big this bag was. He then got a ticket at Newcastle station for the 10:27 a.m. train. He was seen by a witness by the name of Mr. Hall at Stannington station. Stannington is a village on the outskirts of Morpeth. He was again seen later by his wife at Heaton, where he spoke to her for a few moments. Some time later, Mr. Hall said he saw him again at Stannington, and he claims there was just one other man in the compartment with him, something that his wife had also stated when she had seen him at Heaton. This point in the story does confuse me a little. It's described to you exactly as it had been written in the local papers of 1910, but I found it odd that he seemed to have been seen twice at Stannington at different times. The only thought I have on this is that perhaps the papers made a mistake on the locations he was seen, or perhaps he had travelled down from Morpeth first. For those of you who know the North East, you will understand why this information is confusing, as it makes it sound like he's travelling up and down the lines. Mr. Nisbet was not seen alive again after being seen at Stannington. A porter at the Allenmouth station, the terminus of the train journey, was checking the train when he noticed an open window. Opening the door with the intention of closing that window, he instead found the body of Mr. Nisbet. The body was apparently tucked away under a seat with 5 bullet wounds in his head. There was no sign of a weapon or the bag which had contained the money. The bag was later found on June the 9th at the bottom of an air shaft connected to the Hepscott Colliery, which was around 2 miles from Morpeth station. It was described at the time it was found as having been cut open and was empty. Mr. Dickman had also been travelling on the same train. He had an appointment in the Stannington area. However, he said he had been reading his paper, missed his stop, and didn't get off the train until it reached Morpeth. Whether he had indeed been in the same compartment as Mr. Nisbet seems unclear, but one witness claimed to have seen the two men together at Newcastle. Mr. Dickman claimed that he had said good morning to Mr. Nisbet, as would be perfectly normal to do at the time, and said he never saw the man again from that point on. Prior to the arrest of Mr. Dickman, several witnesses came forward with a description of the man seen in the compartment with Mr. Nisbet. One witness being someone who had previously known both Mr. Dickman and Mr. Nisbet for some time, though only by sight and not to actually speak to. The police, acting on this information, went to the home of Mr. Dickman and took him to the station to question him. Although having stated he had not seen Mr. Nisbet since saying good morning to him, the police arrested him on the charge of murder. He said he did not understand being charged and that he also completely denied the charge. The police report stated the evidence of the witness who had seen Mr. Dickman, who also knew him, and another companion beside the first coach was conclusive evidence that Mr. Dickman and the companion, being Mr. Nisbet, had been together and had got into the third compartment of the first coach together. Mr. Dickman denied that he had travelled in the coach at all. It doesn't seem conclusive to me, but it seems there was enough evidence at the time. The trial was heard before the county magistrates at the Moot Hall in Newcastle. Several witnesses were called for both defence and prosecution. It was heard that Mr. Nisbet's wife had spoken to him from the platform, and she had said that she had seen a man in the carriage with him, but that although she had known Mr. Dickman for some years, she had not recognised him at that time. She claimed there had been a shadow from the bridge on his face and that he had had his collar up. However, at the magistrates she had fainted when she had seen Mr. Dickman again. She claimed that as soon as she saw him, she then recognised him as the man she had seen in the carriage with her husband on the day of the murder. Was this because she now believed him to be the murderer, or was it truly because she had seen the same man? It's hard to tell for sure, but the judges said that they were satisfied that her identification was trustworthy. Next, another two cashiers said they had got off the train at Stannington, the station before Morpeth, and that they had both seen Mr. Nisbet alive and well at the time, and they said that he had nodded to them both in passing. One of the two had said that he noticed Mr. Nisbet was sitting with another man, who he later said was very like John Dickman, Mr. Dickman. However, he had failed to pick Mr. Dickman out at the police station, despite what was described as an improper suggestion that had been made. It was reported that Mr. Dickman had been identified to the witness before he took part in the identity parade. It was also heard that before the train had left Morpeth, a passenger had casually looked into the third compartment of the first coach, but said that he saw no one in there. Of course, this person may have been mistaken as to which compartment that he did actually look into, but it's assumed that this was done to prove that Mr. Nisbet was already dead and out of sight under the seat in that carriage at Morpeth. When Mr. Nisbet was found, he had 5 bullet wounds in his head. Some wounds were superficial, but one would have caused instant death. It was said that 2 different kinds of bullets had been found, suggesting 2 different guns had been used, and it was then suggested that Mr. Dickman had used 2 guns on purpose to mystify and confuse the case. The police report said that one gun was a .250 automatic pistol, and it was then noted that Mr. Dickman had bought a .250 automatic pistol in 1907, but it was not noted if he had since sold this or if he still owned it. When Mr. Dickman was questioned, he said that having missed his planned stop, he had got out at Morpeth and he had paid the excess fare. The clerk who took his money said that he had been wearing a loose coat under which he could have concealed a cash bag, but he didn't actually say that he had seen one. Mr. Dickman said he had then decided to walk back to the Dovecot Colliery where he was going to meet someone. It's worth noting that the person he said he was going to meet claimed he had made no appointment with him and that he had actually been in Newcastle on that day. The distance to the Dovecot mine was just over 3 miles from Morpeth Station, and it was mentioned that Mr. Dickman would have then had to have walked another 1.5 miles to Stannington for his return journey. The train that he had been on had reached Morpeth at 11:12 a.m, and he could have simply crossed the line and got the 11:24 a.m. train back to Stannington, so why walk? Of course, for us looking back now, it may simply have been that on paying the extra fare for the first journey, he did not have enough money to take the train back. But this theory is lost, as his walk to the Dovecot colliery was cut short as he was taken ill and returned once more to Morpeth at around 1:15 p.m, so therefore he had to pay the full fare back from Morpeth to Newcastle. It's impossible to really know how far he had walked in the time since his first arrival at 11:12 a.m. Mr. Dickman went on to say that he had gone back to Morpeth because he could get refreshments there, but he did not say if he had had any. He also stated that he was in a very distressed condition with feeling unwell, but that he had not sat down at the station. Instead, he had gone into Morpeth town and returned in time for the 1:40 p.m. train back to Newcastle. When Mr. Dickman was arrested on the 21st of March 1910, he had 17 sovereigns on him, and the police said he could give no satisfactory account as to where they were from. But we might do well to remember that his other job as a betting man and commission agent may have been significant here. Perhaps he could not actually say where that money was from. At his home, the police also found a pair of suede gloves with a small blood stain on the left thumb and some trousers with a blood stain inside the left pocket. It was stated that the bloodstains had been made recently, within a fortnight, but Mr. Dickman had said that he had not worn the gloves for 3 months, and it does seem that no witness mentioned seeing him wearing any gloves. Pawn tickets were also found, and these were used to suggest that Mr. Dickman had money worries. They did not find any weapons in the house. The police reported that they had searched several pit shafts that had been known to Mr. Dickman while he was in that trade, but had not searched the one where the money bag had been found. The man that found the bag also told them that he had previously discussed that shaft with Mr. Dickman some years earlier, although this seems to be, to me, like a long time ago for it to have actually been relevant. Lord Coleridge summed up for 2.25 hours, and the jury retired for 2.5 hours, when finally they returned to give the verdict of guilty of murder. Mr. Dickman was asked if he had anything to say, and he said, "I can only repeat that I am an entirely innocent man. I am entirely innocent of this cruel deed." Sentence of death was passed, and he again said that he was innocent. He did appeal the verdict, but his appeal failed. A petition for reprieve was forwarded to the Home Secretary on the grounds that conviction had been made on wholly circumstantial evidence. This was also denied. The date of execution was set for August the 9th, 1910. Mr. Dickman's wife and children visited him in prison, and at no point in time did he confess to the crime. He always stated his innocence. The execution was set for 8 a.m. on the morning of the 9th. Although no longer public, people still gathered outside the prison. Nothing could be seen, and only the prison's death bell would be heard. Prison chaplain, the Reverend W.F. Lumley, was in attendance, and Mr. Dickman made no answer to the request to confess his crime. Mr. Dickman had dressed himself that morning in the same suit that he had worn for his trial. It is said that he appeared calm and resigned to his fate. He was pinioned, as I have said before. This means his hands were tied at his wrists and taken to the scaffold. gallows is also the same thing. He made no further statement, either to admit his guilt or to repeat his innocence. In fact, he never spoke at all. Death was instantaneous, and afterwards he was buried in the prison grounds beside all those who had gone before him. Some years later, in 1925, a 200-page confession in a letter was received stating that Mr. Dickman was wrongfully convicted and that the writer, who was dying at the time, was the true perpetrator of the crime. The writer did not give his name. Mrs. Dickman was shown the letter, but she said she did not recognise the handwriting, but would compare it with letters she had received over the years about her husband. There is no evidence that I have found that she ever found a letter in the same hand. At the same time as seeing this letter, she asked again what had happened to the money stolen in the crime. She didn't have it, and it had never been found at her home. A mystery, I believe, that was never solved. She still totally believed her husband to be innocent. The police, however, said the letter was nothing more than a hoax. They were confident that they had solved the crime back in 1910 and that no one but Mr. Dickman had been guilty. But was he? There are still a few things I find strange about this case. I am not as yet convinced that the police did get it right. What do you think? Do please let me know. As with the previous story about Mark Sherwood, I mentioned the felon's plot in All Saints Cemetery in Newcastle. Mr. Dickman was one of those removed from the prison grounds and later reburied in secret in a secret location in around 1925 in All Saints Cemetery. I hope you have found this sad and tragic story interesting. If you have enjoyed it, please give the video a like, and please do subscribe to the channel if you'd like to hear more stories like this one. Thank you so much for watching.